I watched all of Demon Slayer in 1 week. Was it worth the hype? Well, that's what I'll be going over today. So if you're new to Demon Slayer or were looking to check out the anime anytime soon, then you'll definitely want to watch until the end of this video to get a full understanding of whether or not Demon Slayer seems like something that you would want to check out. If you're involved in the anime community in any capacity, then there's absolutely no way that you haven't heard of Demon Slayer. It's been deemed one of the most visually stunning and exciting new anime shows to come out in a very long time. I mean, I know that's what interested me to check it out in the first place and what led me to binge watching the entire series in just under a week. For those of you that are completely new to Demon Slayer, I'll be going over my thoughts of each individual season of the anime, and specifically my general thoughts of each arc covered in that season. Or I should say each relevant arc in the season, because I will breeze over a couple moments that are kind of bridge arcs or areas of the season where there's not a whole lot of action or development going on. And that being said, this will be spoiler free for the most part, as I'll only be giving a very brief breakdown on what the arc is about and the key characters of those particular arcs. This way you'll get a good idea of the general plot of each arc, but not know much past that, so I won't kill any of the suspense for you if you do decide to check the anime out. If you click this video, you probably already know what Demon Slayer is and what it's about, but to give a brief 10-second introduction to the series for those of you that are coming in brand new, Demon Slayer follows our main protagonist, Tanjiro Kamado, who comes home one day to find his entire family has been taken out by a demon, leaving only his sister Nezuko alive, but mysteriously turned into a demon herself. This leads Tanjiro to join an organization that defeats demons, the Demon Slayer Corps, in hopes of finding a cure for his sister that can turn her back into a human and eliminate demons so that no one else has to experience the tragedy that he has. Now that that's out of the way, let's start with the first season of the anime. Much of the first half of the season serves as an introduction to the world, meaning an introduction to things like the power system and the prevalence of demons in their world along with their abilities, and defining the major villain of the series as a whole. So considering that, I will be diving into season 1 a little deeper than I do the other 2 seasons, because there is a lot of valuable information that kind of sets the backbone of this story. I actually found it very hard not putting this season as my favorite one out of the 3, and I'll actually explain why in a second. In the first few episodes, a skilled swordsman named Giyu stumbles across Tanjiro and helps him find a master named Sakonji Urokodaki, who shows him what it takes to become a demon slayer. This is when we're introduced to breathing techniques, which are sword fighting styles learned by a demon slayer that mimic a certain aspect of nature. For example, Tanjiro starts by learning water breathing and is taught several attacks that pertain to the water breathing style. These are known as forms. Forms are essentially the moveset that each breathing style specializes in. Well, after this, he goes on to complete the extremely difficult entrance exam to become a demon slayer. This introductory arc includes the first 5 episodes of the series, and while it is packed full of world building knowledge, I never felt like I was overwhelmed with the information at any point. The first few episodes do a great job of spoon feeding important information while keeping everything engaging at all times. There's plenty of action and beautiful fight sequences that always keep you interested. Along with this, these batch of episodes gave me a good idea of the type of tone the series and the main character Tanjiro would carry for pretty much the entirety of the anime. Tanjiro comes off as your good old-fashioned, pure of heart, selfless protagonist that is pretty standard with many shonen stories. He has a high level of empathy for everybody, including demons, as he tries to see the good in anyone no matter their appearance. This is actually where the incredible animation and the storytelling aspect of the show really shine. Every major fight is highly emotional, and it seems at times that the anime's top priority is to make you cry with some of the heart-wrenching backstories of some of these characters. This constant tugging of the heartstrings works really well in the first few episodes, but admittedly did get kind of overbearing for me as the season went along. I mean, I'm a sucker for emotional moments in battle anime where the depth of the story really amplifies the stakes of every fight, but at times I feel like the series tries a little too hard in this area, where some of you might find yourself rolling your eyes at the corniness of some of the scenes. Like, they really try to hammer home some sad moments, and I feel like sometimes they can kind of take their foot off the gas in that area. The next 9 or so episodes after this arc follow Tanjiro as he goes on various Demon Slayer missions, where he learns about the unique abilities that demons can possess, which are called Blood Demon Arts, and also gets introduced to the other 2 characters that'll be joining Tanjiro on his journey as his friends, Inosuke and Zenitsu. Now, I just want to say right now, these 2 are unfortunately one of my least favorite characters in the entire show. Zenitsu's that stereotypical cowardly character, and while under certain circumstances he could actually have some pretty cool fights, I literally cannot stand him for the majority of this season. He's always screaming and whining, and regardless of whether you watch the dub or the sub or not, his screams and complaining can be straight up unbearable at times. Like, I just feel like his whole coward shtick gets way too played out way too fast. The same can kind of be said about Inosuke, who is this type of character that's much like Bakugo from My Hero Academia, in the sense that he thinks he's the strongest of the trio. He gets a really big head sometimes. He's very stubborn, and he also deals with situations in a very loud and aggressive way most of the time. Both of their abilities and fighting styles are pretty cool and unique in their own ways, but I just feel like they could have been handled better narratively. To round out the rest of the episodes in season 1, we get what's called the Mount Nadagumo arc. This is where our main trio face a seriously powerful and creepy spider family, with their leader being one of the 12 Kizuki, which we learn are an elite group of demons that are pretty much stronger than any other demon around. In my opinion, this arc was a very impressive and strong ending to the season because the atmosphere of the entire arc is this very uneasy and disturbing vibe where the stakes truly feel high the entire time. My first time watching this arc, there were several moments where I visibly winced and clenched my body because of how dire the situation was getting for certain characters. And in particular, there's one sequence with Inosuke that really gave me those vibes here. Many of the spider family's abilities were really cool and unique, and our main trio each have some pretty awesome shining moments sprinkled throughout. My only real complaint about this arc is that I didn't really care much for the quote-unquote final boss. I didn't care much for his character design, and his personality was kind of bland, but his abilities were pretty unique and his fighting sequences benefited from that. Just when you think he's shown you his strongest move, he surprises you with something even better. Well, after this arc is resolved, at the very end of this season, we're introduced to the Hashira, which are essentially a counterpart to the 12 Kizuki, where they're an elite group of demon slayers, and after this point are sprinkled throughout the other 2 seasons of the anime, where they join Tanjiro and the crew on their missions. Overall, I'd give this season a solid 8 out of 10. In this season, you get to learn a lot and are treated to some seriously amazing animated fight sequences and some very emotional moments, and there's one in particular during the Mount Nadagumo arc where animation and emotional weight link up perfectly as Tanjiro defeats one of the spider family members. It's truly a beautiful scene and is one of the moments where Tanjiro's basic kind-heartedness actually makes him very endearing, where in contrast, a lot of the times his good-hearted nature kind of left me rolling my eyes here and there. But I think if you enjoy season 1 of the anime, you're definitely going to enjoy everything that comes next. But now we move on to what probably is my favorite season by far of the entire show, and that is season 2, which encompasses the Mugen Train arc and the Entertainment District arc. These arcs actually include my favorite 2 Hashira so far, which are Rengoku and Tengen. The Mugen Train arc is out there in movie form or in regular episodic form, but there's pretty much zero difference between the two, so feel free to watch whichever one. This arc follows Tanjiro and the crew as they board a train where people have been mysteriously disappearing. This arc carries the same incredible animation style from the first season, and in some aspects improves it even further. Where I feel like this arc was lacking though was in the main antagonist and generally the progression of the arc itself. In my opinion, it isn't until the very end of the arc where I had the same clenched feeling of suspense and high stakes, and everything before that was kind of underwhelming. On top of that, our main cast including Tanjiro don't really impress me much with their fights or their character development until maybe the very end. It's almost like they kind of take a back seat to everything that happens in this arc. The true shining star of this whole arc is the Hashira Rengoku. I freaking love this guy anytime he's on the screen. He has a personality that's easy to love, and his awesome fighting style creates some of the most exciting fighting sequences in the entire show. Like, every time he's on screen, this guy is a spectacle and you don't want to miss a beat. His presence demands attention, and his fighting ability and battle prowess is truly impressive. Like I said at the top though, the main antagonist for the majority of this arc was pretty weak in my opinion, and it really hurt the arc as a whole. And when I say weak, I felt like they were a step down in terms of power from the leader of the spider family in season 1, and I never really warmed up to them as a character either. I had the same complaints where I don't really care for their design, I don't really care for their personality, they seem very generic and uninteresting to me. On that note, as I continued to watch the show, by this point I'd started noticing a trend that the big bads of these arcs so far have been pretty underwhelming in general, and that's sadly a theme that carries throughout all 3 seasons with a few exceptions. The stakes never felt super high to me in this arc, and there were plenty of moments where Tanjiro's always do the right thing attitude was like straight up cringeworthy, but the amazing fight sequences at the end made up for a lot of its shortcomings. Overall though, I think they stick the landing with how this arc ends. Moving on to the second half of this season, season, we have the Entertainment District arc, which is hands down my favorite arc of the entire show and is probably in my top 10 anime arcs of all time. Like, it's seriously that good to me. In this arc, we follow Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu as they join Hashira Tengen on a mission to the Entertainment District. Like the Mugen Train arc, this one was more of a slow burn where things don't really ramp up until the halfway point, but where these two arcs differ is in how engaging the plot was during that slow burn. We get more info on the lore of the Demon Slayer world, and the first half really takes on a noir style vibe, all taking place in a bustling, culturally rich town. You're left second guessing yourself a lot, not knowing where things are going to go next, and I really appreciated the level of mystery that shrouded the majority of this arc because it felt that much more satisfying once all the reveals actually came. Contrary to the first arc of the season, Tanjiro and the rest get some solid character development and progression, where I felt like they came out of the arc much stronger and much more seasoned. Tanjiro in particular really impresses with his fighting ability and resilience, and he actually stands out as one of the best characters of the entire arc. You'd think that would be the case in every arc for the main character of the story, right? But in this case, Tanjiro can definitely be one of the weaker aspects of an arc depending on the season. This is mainly because he doesn't really have a personality. Like, he really just is more of like a generic, pure of heart guy that always tries to do the right thing. And I don't know, that doesn't tend to be the type of protagonist that I gravitate towards, but to each their own, right? Well, much like the Mugen Train though, the Hashira in this one, Tengen, really stole the show along with the main antagonist of this arc. Tengen probably takes the prize for me as the best character in the entire series because I really enjoy his personality, backstory, and insanely cool fighting style. Every scene that Tengen fights in is amazing and puts the high-end animation on full display. Along with that, the main antagonist of this arc is by far my favorite of all the antagonists that I've seen so far. Their backstory is one of the more emotionally engaging of any character. Their moves and abilities are creative, and you truly feel the gravity of their presence from the moment they first step into a scene to the very moment that they leave. Unlike the main antagonist from the other arcs, I love this one's design, personality, and overall impact on the arc, where they make the stakes feel like they've never been any higher. The setting of this arc is great, the characters introduced are some of the best in the series, and the ending of this arc really finishes the season off on an extremely exciting and satisfying note. I give this season a strong 9 out of 10. I honestly cannot say enough good things about the Entertainment District arc, and the Mugen Train arc has enough shining moments to make up for its faults. So now we move on to season 3, which in my opinion is probably the weakest season so far. The animation is still incredible as it is in the other two seasons, although it does rely on CGI more heavily in this one, but depending on how you feel about CGI, it might be a bad or a good thing. Where my real complaints with this season stem from though is in the main antagonist and the fact that the stakes never truly feel high like they did in season 2. They never really brought much to the table for me. I know I bring up stakes a lot in this video, but to me it's one of the most important aspects of any good anime. I like to feel like the good guys have a realistic chance of losing, and that no matter the outcome, the impact of the conflict will affect the main characters and the story as a whole heavily. If there's always just a clear road for the good guys to win, it doesn't really make for much exciting storytelling, in my opinion at least. At times, this season almost felt like a filler arc with how low the stakes seemed. Things just came way too easy for the good guys in this one, and I don't know, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The main antagonists seem way weaker than the one in season 2, even though in reality they're technically stronger. Their backstories are almost non-existent, and while their powers were actually pretty cool, they were never really put on full display much like they were for the antagonists of season 2. They just never had a presence of a truly powerful opponent to our main cast. This season covers the Swordsmith Village arc, where we meet two more Hashira, Muichiro and Mitsuri. If I'm being honest, these two were by far the most interesting new characters in the arc, along with another character, Genya. All three of their backstories were unique and engaging, and their fighting styles were honestly very entertaining to watch. Genya in particular was probably my favorite character of the entire season, because although I felt like Muichiro had the best backstory and Mitsuri had the best fighting sequences, Genya was strong in all areas and left me hoping to see more of him as the series went along. The implied power of the villains and the potential disaster they cause in this season had a ton of promise, but like I said earlier, it all just felt like a filler arc that had no real ramifications. On top of that, Zenitsu and Inosuke aren't present in the entirety of the arc, which could be a good or a bad thing depending on how you feel feel about them. For me, it was kind of a good thing. I don't really care much for them. As with every season before it though, it does stick the landing with how it ends, and we get some serious development for Tanjiro and Nezuko as characters that did leave me excited to see what happens with them next. Like, I feel like season 3 is probably the biggest change in character for Tanjiro and Nezuko, like the biggest development for their story. So that's an aspect of this season that kind of saves it. Overall, I give this season a 7 out of 10. All this being said, if you're a fan of beautiful animation and exciting fighting sequences, you'll definitely love Demon Slayer. To me, it really did live up to the hype in terms of animation and world building. Like, the animation studio that made Demon Slayer Ufotable truly outdid themselves and created an anime that is definitely worthy of being called one of the most beautiful looking anime to come out in a very long time. Now, that being said though, the negatives. I certainly feel like character development is generally not a strong suit of this series, since characters like Inosuke and Zenitsu feel like they haven't changed at all since we first met them in season 1. There are some exceptions, but I feel like character writing as a whole is not very strong in this series, because many of the characters, including Tanjiro, the freaking protagonist, can come off as very generic and one-dimensional a lot of the time. Also, things can get very like cringy and corny at times with how prototypically shonen some of the dialogue and themes in this anime are. Like, sometimes I wish that they would let the scene kind of create the emotion, the actions that the characters are taking kind of drive the story, but I feel like a lot of the times they really try to hammer home some kind of emotional sequence and almost try to make you feel a certain emotion, and I feel like that kind of takes away from the experience sometimes. If you're looking for a breath of fresh air when it comes to a protagonist and a cast of characters that bring something new to the table when it comes to the shonen genre, then this really isn't the show for you, if I'm being honest. Overall, if you're an anime enjoyer though, I really do think you're going to have a good time watching this anime. Visually, it's very refreshing and obviously binge worthy because I did end up watching it in less than a week, but I want to know your thoughts in the comments below. Did I convince you to watch the anime? Have you already watched it? Do you share some of the same ideas that I do? Let me know in the comments below. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, and if you end up watching the anime after you watch this, definitely let me know what you thought of it. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe if you enjoy anime and manga type content, because I do post on this channel each and every week, multiple times a week, so I'll always have you covered. That's it for this one though. Have an absolutely wonderful day or night, whatever, and I'll see you guys in the next video.